Put 2 fingers right in front of your ears right now and open your mouth slowly. Did you feel it? That tiny click, that little shift, that split second where the bone seems to jump before it settles back into place. You've felt it before. Maybe while eating. Maybe while yawning. Maybe in the middle of a conversation when your jaw suddenly locked for half a second and your brain screamed, "What was that?" You brushed it off. Everyone does. But here's the part nobody tells you. That click is not a malfunction. It is a message. It is a fossil record written in your own skull of a decision your ancestors made hundreds of thousands of years ago, a decision that saved their lives and is now slowly wearing down yours. By the end of this video, you will never open your mouth the same way again. You live inside your body every single day, and yet there are entire mechanisms operating beneath your skin that you have never once stopped to interrogate. The jaw is one of them. You chew, you talk, you yawn, you clench when you're stressed, and you don't even notice you're doing it. The jaw is background noise, a piece of machinery so reliable you forgot it was machinery at all. But somewhere between your ear canal and your cheekbone sits a joint unlike almost any other in your body. It's called the temporomandibular joint, and unlike your knee or your elbow, it doesn't just bend, it slides, rotates, and glides across a small disc of cartilage that has to move perfectly in sync every single time you speak a sentence or take a bite of food. Most of the time, you don't feel it working. And that's exactly the problem, because the day you do feel it, the day it clicks or catches or locks halfway open so that for one terrifying second you can't close your own mouth, is the day you realize this joint has been quietly working overtime for your entire life, absorbing forces you never accounted for, and it has been failing in tiny, invisible increments long before that first click ever happened. Think about how many times you've opened and closed your mouth today without thinking about it once. Every word you spoke, every bite of breakfast, every yawn on the drive to work. Now multiply that by every day of your life, going back to your first cry as a newborn. That's the workload this joint has carried, silently, without a single moment of recognition, for every year you've been alive. No other joint in your body operates on that scale of repetition while receiving that little attention. Your knees get physical therapy. Your back gets stretches. Your jaw gets nothing until the day it decides to announce itself. Here's the detail that should unsettle you a little. Humans are the only primates on Earth with a jaw joint that clicks this often. Chimpanzees don't get this. Gorillas don't get this. Orangutans, bonobos, every one of our closest living relatives, sharing over 98% of our DNA, chew their entire lives without this problem. Wild animals in general don't experience this at anywhere near the rate we do. So the question isn't just why does my jaw click? The real question, the one that actually matters, is this: what did we do differently that no other primate on the planet had to do? It starts small, a click while eating an apple, a slight catch when you laugh too wide. You tell yourself it's nothing, and for a while, you're right, it feels like nothing. But the body doesn't create noise without cause, and if you actually start paying attention, you'll notice the pattern repeats in a very specific order. It happens more on one side than the other. It happens more when you're tired, more when you're stressed, more after a long day of gritting your teeth without realizing it. Some people notice it worsens after a stressful meeting. Others notice it flares up during allergy season, when sinus pressure changes the way the jaw sits. The pattern is never random, even when it feels that way. It's simply a signal your brain hasn't learned to read yet. And here's the detail that most people never connect. The click almost always happens on the opening movement, not the closing one, which tells scientists something very specific about which structure inside the joint is misbehaving. Inside your jaw joint sits a small disc of cartilage, roughly the shape and size of a fingernail, that is supposed to sit perfectly on top of the mandible's rounded head and travel with it every time you open your mouth. When that disc slips even slightly out of position, a condition doctors call disc displacement, your jawbone has to physically jump over it to keep moving. That jump is the click. It is, quite literally, your bone climbing over a piece of misplaced cartilage every single time you open your mouth to speak. Now imagine that happening thousands of times a day, every day for years, without you ever knowing the mechanical reason behind it. Some people's discs slip back into place almost immediately, which is why the click sounds harmless and stays that way for a lifetime. But for others, the disc slowly drifts further forward each time, and each cycle wears down the tissue just a little more, like a hinge grinding slightly off its track. What starts as an audible click can, over years, become stiffness. stiffness can become discomfort. Discomfort, left unaddressed and compounded by stress, can eventually become the locking that stops you mid-sentence and makes you wonder, for one panic second, if your jaw will ever open again. And this is where it gets stranger, because researchers who study evolutionary anatomy started asking a question that seems almost absurd on the surface. Why would evolution design a joint this fragile in the first place? Every other joint in the human body, the hip, the shoulder, the knee, evolved under enormous selective pressure to be stable, load-bearing, resistant to failure. But the jaw joint, the one you use thousands of times a day, every single day, for your entire life, is comparatively delicate. It shouldn't make sense, unless the joint wasn't built for what we're currently using it for. That's the sentence that changes everything. Because it wasn't. To understand what's actually happening in your jaw right now, you have to go back roughly 2 million years to a version of the human skull that looked almost nothing like yours. Early hominins had jaws that were wider, thicker, and anchored by muscles nearly twice the size of the ones you have today, because their food demanded it: raw roots, tough fibrous plants, unprocessed meat torn straight from bone, seeds and nuts that had to be cracked open with sheer force. Chewing wasn't a casual act, it was manual labor, performed for hours a day, and the jaw joint evolved specifically to handle that grinding, repetitive, high-force load across an entire lifetime. Anthropologists studying fossilized jawbones have found tooth wear patterns so extreme that some researchers estimate early humans spent up to 5 or 6 hours a day just chewing, simply to extract enough calories to survive. Then something happened that anthropologists consider one of the most underrated turning points in human evolution. We discovered fire, and shortly after, we discovered how to process food before it ever reached our mouths, cutting it, pounding it, cooking it until it softened. And the immediate effect was survival. Softer food meant more digestible calories, meant more energy for a rapidly growing brain, meant fewer hours a day spent grinding tough plant matter just to stay alive. Some researchers argue this single shift from raw, fibrous food to cooked, processed food freed up enough time and energy that it directly enabled the explosive growth of the human brain over the following hundreds of thousands of years. It was, without exaggeration, one of the trades that made the modern human brain possible. But evolution doesn't rebuild an organ from scratch just because its workload changed. It doesn't reason. It doesn't plan ahead. It only ever works with what's already there, reshaping it gradually, generation after generation, in whatever direction survival happens to favor. Over the following hundreds of thousands of years, our jaws and jaw muscles shrank dramatically to match our new, softer diet: smaller mandibles, thinner muscle mass, narrower dental arches, less bone density along the jawline. But the joint itself, that same delicate hinge and slide mechanism engineered for a heavy grinding workload, never fully caught up to the shrinking frame around it. You are walking around today with a jaw joint that is, structurally, still somewhat sized and shaped for the mechanical demands of a Paleolithic diet, sitting inside a jawbone that has downsized for a diet of bread, yogurt, and pre-cut chicken. The mismatch is the click. The mismatch is the lock. The mismatch is the disc slipping slightly out of place because the muscles holding it in perfect tension were never rebalanced for the smaller, weaker structures surrounding them. And then modern life adds its own weight on top of an already imperfect design. Chronic stress causes people to clench their jaws through the night without ever waking up, grinding enamel and straining the joint for 6, 7, 8 hours while unconscious. A condition so common that dentists estimate a significant percentage of adults do it without any awareness at all. Desk posture pushes the head forward, subtly changing the angle at which the jaw hangs and forcing the joint to compensate in ways it was never meant to. Even chewing gum, something marketed as harmless, adds thousands of repetitive cycles onto a joint already living with a design debt 2 million years in the making. Add in modern anxiety, screen time, poor sleep, and constant low-grade tension held in the face and neck, and you have a joint under more consistent daily strain than it has faced at any point in human history, not because we're using it more, but because we're using it wrong in ways our ancestors' bodies never had to account for. Every clench, every grind, every hour of forward head posture is another small vote pushing that already displaced disc a little further from where it belongs, and none of it announces itself until the day it does. So here is where the story lands, and it's not the ending you expected when you pressed play. The click in your jaw is not a malfunction. It is not random. It is not bad luck. It is a physical record of a trade your species made hundreds of thousands of years ago. The trade of raw strength for raw intelligence, of grinding power for cooked convenience, of a heavier skull for a bigger brain. Every time your jaw clicks, you are hearing the echo of that trade happening again, in real time, inside your own head. The disc that slips is smaller and weaker than it used to need to be, sitting inside muscles that shrank faster than the joint could adapt, inside a species that decided, collectively and unknowingly, that thinking mattered more than chewing. For most people, that click never becomes anything worse. It stays a strange little quirk, a party fact you now understand instead of ignore. But for a smaller number, that mismatch keeps compounding. Clenching, stress, posture, repetitive strain, until the disc slips far enough that the joint doesn't just click anymore, it locks, refusing to open or close for seconds that feel like minutes, until the muscles finally release and the joint reluctantly snaps back into place on its own. When that happens, it is not weakness. It is not something you did wrong. It is your body running a mechanical program that was written for a completely different diet, in a completely different world, on a completely different skull than the one shrinking around it today. And maybe that's the strangest part of all, that something as small and ordinary as a click in your jaw is, in a very real sense, evidence. Evidence that you exist because your ancestors made a trade. Evidence that the same shift that gave you the capacity to sit here right now, listening to this, thinking about your own anatomy in a way no chimpanzee ever could, also left behind a small, imperfect cost, quietly ticking away in a joint you never think about until it forces you to. Put your fingers back in front of your ears one more time. Open slowly. Whatever sound you hear now, you'll never hear it the same way again, because now you know it's not a glitch. It's a 2 million-year-old negotiation, still being renegotiated every single time you open your mouth. If this shifted the way you think about your own body, subscribe. There's a lot more hiding in plain sight like this. And down in the comments, tell me, does your jaw click on one side or both? Because the answer might reveal more than you think.